FastFish Podcast brought to you by SEAC, a lifelong learning center.
สวัสดีค่ะดิฉันศศิการวัฒนจันทร์และนี่คือ FastFish Podcast โดย SEAC ศูนย์พัฒนาและส่งเสริมการเรียนรู้ตลอดชีวิตแห่งภูมิภาคอาเซียนนำเสนอเรื่องราวและหลักคิดการทำธุรกิจในโลกยุคใหม่ที่ปลาไวสามารถชนะปลาใหญ่ได้สวัสดีค่ะคุณผู้ฟัง FastFish Podcast ทุกท่านคะสำหรับ EP นี้นะคะเป็น EP พิเศษภาคภาษาอังกฤษค่ะโดยเรามีการถ่ายทำเป็นวิดีโอให้คุณผู้ฟัง Podcast สามารถเข้าไปชมคลิปจาก YouTube ที่มีซับไตเติลไทยประกอบด้วยค่ะโดยที่ทุกท่านสามารถเข้าไปชมได้นะคะที่ช่อง YouTube ของ SEAC ค่ะ Hello everyone this is a very special episode besides this will be in English.You can watch this episode from SEAC YouTube channel. And we also provide a Thai subtitle on the YouTube video as well. Our special guests in this FastFish podcast for this EP are Mr. Andrew and Mrs. Gaia Grant, the co-founders and directors of Tirian International, a global consultancy which has offered their services to many of the Fortune 500 companies.and which has been a key partner with SEAC for about 15 years. Andrew and Gaia are famous experts on creativity and innovations who co-author bestseller books such as Who Killed Creativity and The Innovation Race. And since this episode is titled Who Killed Thailand's Creativity?We also invited Mr. James Engel, Chief Learning Architect at SEAC, to help adding some Thai perspectives. So, Jaya, what type of the leadership that needed to navigate the future, let's say for the globally, Thailand and Asia?
That's a very good question because I think we make assumptions about what innovation is, first of all. So everybody's worried about the future and we're talking about digitalization and we're talking about disruptive innovations. And so there's an assumption there that we need to have this risk-taking approach to leadership and we need to be looking for breakthrough innovations that are going to deal with those challenges. But there's an interesting flip side to innovation that we don't often think about.And that is that we also need this sort of incremental, slow development that supports the systems and structures that will build innovation over the long term. So to make it sustainable, you need both that breakthrough approach to innovation, plus you need that slow, incremental, careful, stable approach to innovation. And through my research, that's what I've identified as ambidextrous leadership.So most leaders have this either-or approach. They think either we need to be innovating and looking to the future, or we need to be focusing on our systems and structures. But the leaders of the future have to have both.
Both
so
either-or?
Yes, it's and thinking. There's no sort of black or white. You need to be able to sustain both simultaneously, which of course is really challenging, but really essential.And sometimes that's, you know, an individual leader has to have that ambidextrous thinking, but it's also the team, the leadership team needs to be thinking ambidextrously and they need to have different people in the team who represent those positions. And as an organisation as a whole, you need to have that ambidextrous approach. So you need to have different parts of the organisation that are ensuring that those different perspectives are covered effectively.And that's happening globally. We can see that the incredibly fast, rapid pace of change is leading to a level of complexity that we're all struggling to keep up with. And that's happening in Asia and it's happening in Thailand, you know, and probably especially in countries like Thailand, where you have these wonderful traditions that you want to hang on to, but you also need to compete on a global scale.And so you have to be balancing these extremes. And this is a huge paradox that these two positions are both contradictory, but they're also complementary. You have to have both.
So talking about Thailand, can you be more specific on the leadership that you see?
I think Probably countries like Thailand and certainly across Asia Pacific, because we've worked through, well, probably more than 40 countries now globally, and we can see some trends. And across Asia Pacific, there are often education systems that have been set up that are not as supportive as that of that ambidextrous thinking, because you're taught to think in a certain way, and you're taught to repeat the information that's been given to you rather than accepting ambiguities and being comfortable with that uncertainty and challenging and questioning that uncertainty. So to move into the future, countries like Thailand are going to have to get comfortable with saying it's okay, to not know exactly what the future holds or not know exactly how to deal with a particular situation. But if you can develop, it's like developing any muscle. If you can strengthen both sides of your thinking so that you're thinking in the long-term future as well as in the here and now, and of course, reaching back into the past and learning from and drawing from that as well.
Right.
Then that will really stretch you and challenge you and help to build the flexibility and the agility that you need to survive in the future.
Interesting. James, as you work in Thailand quite a while.
16 years now.
Yeah, I would say it's a long time, but 16
Half
years.
of my life. Yeah.
So how do you see Thailand? I mean, what does leadership need to navigate this?
Well, I think Thailand's going through an amazing transition right now. I think you've got multiple generations, obviously, in the workforce, and you've got an aging workforce. And so most of the people who are running the business, particularly the large family businesses, are the old line leadership, sometimes the first or second generation of leadership, who were educated in the old traditions, very much of a command and control, which you have to do.
Right.
And a lot of the traditions about the respect for the authority, I don't speak up, I let very much of a follower mentality.
Right.
So when you have that type of culture set up in an organization, innovation and creativity are really restricted. Okay, because I can't speak up because I don't want my boss to look bad, or I don't want to lose face because I might be wrong. And of course, innovation and creativity thrives on failure. You learn through failure, and it's very difficult to do in these types of cultures in Southeast Asia and in Thailand. So
it's a culture.
We're seeing a transition. I think a lot of Thai businesses and a lot of Thai executives, even the more senior ones we work with here at SEAC, are seeing that I have to let go. Very hard to change that at a later age, but recognizing that, I think we're seeing a shift in the culture. The education system's still trying to catch up to that because it's still operating the same way. It's an issue that the Thailand, the government, and private business sees as needing to be addressed, and there's lots of people jumping on that to make it happen. But that has to accelerate, and the ability for people to think for themselves, the ability for them to speak up and step up, starts with the environment that the leader creates.
Are you seeing more of an openness to that? I'm just curious to know. So.
Yeah, well, I think it's a safety and a cultural issue that the leadership has to recognize. That we hear executives. I've heard the whole time I've been here. I wish my people would step up and speak up. I wish they'd be more accountable. I wish they would share more ideas. And what leadership doesn't recognize is that they're part of that, creating the environment that doesn't allow that. And also, they're residing in the culture that tells me I can't really do that. I don't feel safe yet. And it's going to take some time.
It takes a lot of courage as a leader, doesn't it, to step back.
And we've seen some really great cases where some leaders have really tried to say, I want to be a different kind of leader. I want to be the kind of leader where it's safe for you or for you to actually share something. And I'm not going to judge that, or I'm not going to jump in. I'm going to say, I may think I have a better idea, but let's try that. And we've seen them be able to let go, and it takes time.
Right.
To let go, because it's really about creating the environment. And then the leader needs to know when I'm pushing innovation really hard, which in some cases in some organizations the culture can't change fast enough to push it fast. But the culture can change fast enough for a leader to be a different person for others, allowing that safety and that space for them to innovate at that incremental level that Jay was talking about.
Right. Okay. If we can't change the culture that fast, the thing that we need to change ourselves, right?
Yeah, I have to be a different person for you.
Oh, right. Uh-huh.
If I want you to change.
So one word that you talk is creativity. Andrew, there's a book named Who Killed Our Creativity, and I believe that it's very useful and that we're going to talk it now. At the end of the book, who killed our creativity?
Well, we had been teaching design thinking and creative thinking for many, many years.
Right.
And a lot of people would be sent to our sessions by leaders saying, go and do this, particularly banks and financial institutions. And the first thing we'd notice is they'd turn up to our sessions and they'd say, this is not for me. I'm not the creative department. I don't want to do design thinking. I got into banking, or as you said, I'm from an Asian culture. It's not necessarily my job to make these big decisions. It's my boss's job. Yeah. And we thought there's no point in teaching these sessions on how to be creative or innovative or design thinking if we're not addressing the issues that are in the room. For over 15 years, we started collecting these excuses of what is stopping people being creative. And then we started researching and we worked with a neuroscientist to validate the excuses we heard. Right. And we realized that all of us as children were creative. 98% of children score high on the Genius Creativity Test. Now, this is global, not just in Asia. 2% of adults managed to score high on that test.
They dropped.
They dropped, 98% to 2.
Wow. That's a big difference.
Why is that?
Well, if I've got 50 people in the room, that's one person can leave for the session. And so we decided that there is no point in us continuing teaching stuff because why come to one of our workshops when you can buy a book on creativity, buy 1,000 books, watch 1 million YouTube videos, if we're not dealing with the issue of what's blocking people's creativity? Why are they coming to these workshops saying this is not my responsibility, this is not what I want to do? And it's either your personal upbringing or the culture you've been brought up in, and that culture could be your family culture, it could be your company culture, your school culture, and your country culture. It doesn't matter, it's a culture. It doesn't matter where it happens. But if we've had our creativity blocked, then everything Jay and Jim have talked about is not going to happen. And so I know people want to come straight in and they want to hear all about innovation. And 5 years ago, they wanted to hear all about creative thinking. But we've got to keep backing up. And now they're all talking about embracing digital. None of that's going to happen until we can change the individual to learn to become more creative and to explore their creative thinking, to explore their ability to do that. And if they're going to do that, they must address the things that block that in the first place.
So do you think what blocked our creativity? Well,
we identified, after collecting all these responses and working with a neuroscientist when we wrote the book, we identified 7 key I'll use the word killers because we like to use a metaphor.
Weapons,
yeah, you can use it now, actually.
Yes, but who wants to write a book on creativity and be uncreative about it? So we thought we'd make the book a bit of a crime scene. Again, it's a memorable way of running a workshop, so people can remember the workshop. So we'll call them blockers or killers, whether you're a creative person or not. You can think of it that way. But we identified 7 things that blocked our creativity, and they range from control to fear to pressure, to narrow-mindedness, to apathy, to insulation, and pessimism. And they were the 7 things that really blocked people's creativity. And we feel it's really important before we ask anyone to be innovative or any of the things that Jaya and Jim have talked about is to address those issues first. If you come to work every day, as Jim said, fear of failure, fear of losing face, fear of risk, there is no way you're going to be innovative. If you come to work every day and your work environment is a micromanaged, controlled environment where the leaders above you need to control everything, there is no way you're going to want to feel like sharing an idea or coming up with different ways of doing things. If you do, you'll keep it to yourself.
Right.
And if you're silly, you might tell someone and they might put you down and say that's not your responsibility. And this is the cultural glue that tends to be blocking the creative thinking process.
Any idea?
I was talking earlier about the ambidexterity, the need to support both perspectives of the breakthrough and the incremental approach to innovation. And what's at the core of that I identified in the research was 2 perspectives that I labelled as exploration and preservation.
Right.
So exploration is that breakthrough approach, and that's critical to creative thinking, which Andrew's talked about. We need to free that that exploration approach so that we can brainstorm effectively, so we can come up with fresh thinking and ideas. But the whole approach to innovation and the creative process also needs that balance of the critical thinking. And that's your preservation. So that's where you're just having a very careful incremental approach as a foundation for that growth and that future thinking. And so the research I did, I actually did some really interesting research, both in depth, looked at successful innovation leaders.
Right.
And the most successful innovation leaders used ambidextrous language. So they would say in the same sentence, I had someone say, to be innovative, you have to both collaborate with others effectively and you have to think independently.
Right.
And you see, that's a paradox.
It is.
Because, yes, you've got to think independently to come up with creative ideas for exploration, but you also have to collaborate for exploration, to connect those ideas and build on those ideas.
It's also like that statement, very much what you hear is you got to go slow to go fast.
Yes.
So to set up speed,
exactly.
Particularly in these cultures, sometimes you have to take the time up front to set the stage, and that making sure that people understand what the change is or what the innovation is and their role in it and feel comfortable so that you can go fast later. So go slow to go fast.
Yes. And there are so many interesting principles at that core of that ambidextrous leadership approach that can really challenge you. So you think about how you need to both be open to new ideas and new thinking and diversity for exploration, but you also need focus. So you
It sounds easy, but actually it's not that easy.
And when you think of what we're doing in organisations today is we're setting up these open offices. So we're going to one extreme of, everybody's connecting and collaborating, but people can't get the job done and they're often, disrupted during the process. We also need to create spaces where people can go and just focus and think independently and work independently.
Right.
So it's important to see, you look back in history that we used to have cubicles, people working in rows, autocratic leadership styles, and we've gone to the other extreme where there's this really open approach. And in the past we went from this controlled approach to freedom, but we need a balance between the two. We need to have both at the same time.
Jay, would you say it's a balance or a tension?
Well, it's a tension because you're constantly trying to maintain that balance, and there's never a perfect position to be in. And each
but you would say that
and
you've
each
either that tension of exploration and preservation is there. You can't deny it. Sometimes an alpha personality will override it to the point where no one else gets a say. And again, that might happen in these cultures where a very strong personality comes in and that's it. No one's even was going to put the hand up and say but. But the tension's there, whether it's above the iceberg, above the ocean or below it. That tension between the explorers and the preservers will always be there. What we're seeing is that tension will either rip the company apart eventually.
It's a dynamic that can really fuel innovation, and if it's recognised and respected, as Andrew said.
So if I own a company, I'm listening to you guys now, and I would like to become more creative and more innovative, and I'm the leader of the company. What step or what methodology do you advise?
I would say you need to start by looking at yourself as a leader. So are you stretching yourself in both ways? Are you recognising that you need both a focus on exploration and preservation? And are you able to stretch your thinking to cover that? Secondly, I would, most individuals can't do both simultaneously. It's too difficult. We have our own bias.
It is.
So are you looking at other people in the organisation who can help to provide that balance? And I often refer to an organisation that's very well known, Apple, because the leadership style there is really interesting. You have Steve Jobs, who was very open and very much an explorer in his creative thinking, in his way he dealt with developing products.
Right.
But in his leadership style, he was the opposite. He was very controlling. So he had to step back from that leadership of the organisation, bring in Tim Cook, who was very much a preserver, and he was able to focus on the systems and the structures and develop all of the models that would support that sort of rapid growth that Steve Jobs was taking the organisation through. And they were highly successful as an organisation at that point, where there was both perspectives represented and there was a lot of respect between the two. the interesting thing is for the future, now that Steve Jobs is gone, what's going to happen? Is there too much of a focus on preservation now with Tim Cook in charge?
You know, maybe there was, in a startup phase, we needed to be the explorers when we were starting up the company, and then we may need to move into more that preserving stage. Now, where do we want to go after that? I've been working with a large hotel chain, I won't say who, that was one of the most innovative chains in the world originally, and the CEO comes on board recently and says to me, we've been doing this for 20 years, we're no longer innovative, we've become a bureaucratic, you know, a normal hotel, and yet that wasn't our founding vision. And so we want to get back to being that cutting edge hotel chain. And as soon as he said that, I said, I can map that for you. I can show you where you've been, where you are, and where you need to go. And when you do that, then we'll need to see who needs to do what and what behaviours in the organisation do we need to have as leaders to get us from where we are now to where we need to go. Because I think if companies are left on their own, they will go, we use the example of a racetrack, they will go off the sides of the road. One of our neighbours was the CEO of a large insurance company, and he's just started up his own insurance company, and he's doing really, really well because he says the older insurance companies have so much legacy, so much bureaucracy, they can't dig themselves out of the hole.
No.
And so everyone starts, I mean, Jay has got a spring model. I don't know if we can explain it in a podcast. Everyone starts at the exploring end and then sort of veers towards the preserving, and they need to know where they are on that road. And when we're in doubt, they're in danger of going off. Now, we've talked a lot about Thailand, but Singapore's a great example. For the last 50 years, Lee Kuan Yew was a very controlling, ran a very controlling country, and it did really, really well.
Yeah,
and it got, Singapore became such one of the few countries in the world to be so successful in such a short period of time. Now, I'm not going to predict their future, but what got them to where they are now may not necessarily get them to where they need to go in the future. And that's something we need to think about. We need to map out where we are as individuals, and we need to map out where we are as a team and as an organisation, and possibly even as a country.
Yeah, it's a great example for Singapore. And how about Thailand? Can you share some insight, and anyone, Jim or Andrew, can share some insight or interesting fact that you have learned from working with the Thai clients?
Well, I think when you talk about the two different types, I think it goes back to there's at the foundation within the cultures, you can be either one of those two styles. And they have, I think, in Thailand, executives are in there. But it's basically they still have to implement through the organization. So the foundations of the culture of respect, of authority, respect for age, the saving of face. The leadership also has an additional burden or additional transformation that has to happen with allowing their people to see them as people, and for them to see to bring out the innate creativity that's available to them. I mean, the best example I've been here for 16 years, and I kind of fell into this culture saying, oh, the education system, these people don't think for themselves. And for a long time, I was like just constantly giving clear instructions and constantly telling people what because I'm a farang, I know everything, right? You guys, I'm coming in here as an expert, and just it's been really disruptive for me that I've had to accelerate our transition to SEAC means we had to shut down a company and completely reinvent how we did things. And the way I did it before was not going to work as a leader.
Right.
And so I have to trust and let go. And I have been consistently amazed at not only how much my team and my people can do without me telling them exactly how to do something. As long as I make the what really clear, if they feel safe enough, they're going to actually come up with better ways of doing it than I can.
And I call that guided freedom.
Yeah.
So it's both. It's not too much control. It's not too much freedom. You provide guidance with principles,
and I think,
and then people will be empowered, and they'll develop their own creative thinking and capabilities without being just told what to do.
And I think that the first step for a lot of the Thai leadership is to be able to step back and say, I have to make the where we're going or what we're doing really clear, and kind of into the why, the Simon Sinek stuff. But the how, I really believe that the younger generation is going to figure out better, faster, smarter ways than I can.
Would that come back to, Jim, really, instead of making those micromanaged decisions, right down to checking people's emails, would that come back to when someone comes to you as a leader, just constantly reminding them, as again, not falling into the trap of I'm the expert, I'm going to tell you how to do everything, but comes back to constantly reminding them of, well, what's our vision, mission and values, what do we stand for? And I know it takes a little bit more work than saying, let's do this ourselves. And as long as they can justify to you, it's within your scope, then you're okay with that. Yeah. But as you said, there's many young people out there that know more about digitalization than we do. Imagine us trying to manage what digitalization means to them.
Yeah, so my daughter at 9 years old taught me how to use Google Drive. I mean, so who am I fooling, right?
Yeah.
So I think to your point, I think it goes beyond the mission, vision, values. I think that's a
well, that was
really
too big.
Yeah, that's a big concept.
Get down, but yeah.
When you get down to execution and where we want to go or what we want to try to do, I think it really is about. Jay, you hit it right in the head. I think it's guided, and it's regular follow-up, it's regular touch points, like how are you doing, where are you, what do you need, and then you make adjustments. But I believe allowing that freedom it's an absolute necessity in Thailand, because this generation of leadership that we have now is retiring, and the generation that's coming in is 10% smaller than the generations later. So your workforce starts shrinking in Thailand next year.
But digitalization means it can scale bigger.
That's right. So you're going to still have to add 7 million jobs, most of which will be new skills. And so allowing the people below you to start to be innovative now, or be able to think for themselves, and giving them the guided freedom as a skill for leaders now. I have the skill to be able to give my people guided freedom is going to be critical.
I remember working in our very, very early years. We worked with the Four Seasons Hotel in Indonesia, and it became the #1 hotel in the world 3 years in a row, which is pretty good when the staff are Balinese fishermen. So it's not like, they came out of the hotel school in Sweden or anything. But the general manager there was one of the first people I met in our industry, and we used to have a long conversation because we ended up being neighbours. And I remember early on in my time in researching this, he would sit down to me and he'd say, Andrew, every morning when I have an executive meeting, I ask my staff, what would they do better today than they did yesterday? So instead of coming in and micromanaging and saying, I'm the expert, as what Jim was saying, you do this, you do this, you do this, he would let them fail, and then he'd debrief them. Now, of course, he said he wouldn't let them fail if it was an F&B, a banquet for 100 VIPs. Maybe they could fail in the kitchen, but he doesn't want them failing in front of the staff. So obviously you've got to guide that. You've got to guide that failing where it doesn't affect your customer. So that's when he would step in.
Safe space.
Yeah, he would step in when he felt that the failure could affect the customer.
Right.
But as long as the failure didn't affect the customer, even though he knew it was going to fail, he would let it fail and then guide the people through the next day and debrief them and say, well, tell me what happened, what went wrong, what could we do better next time? And to me, that was such a powerful way of his staff learning. And he really took a group of fishermen, which is the lowest caste of the Balinese, and turned them into the best hotel in the world 3 years in a row. So it wasn't just a one-off accidental, we got it right because we're a nice luxury hotel. And I think that was because of his leadership style, really empowering people, just like what Jim was saying, giving them enough freedom to go out and make mistakes, but guiding them so they knew what to do. Now, my son's got a job at the moment and his boss is so free, he just lets him do anything. And then my son makes mistakes. He's on an internship and then he comes home very stressed because he made a mistake and he wasn't exactly debriefed on it and he didn't know what to do.
Too much freedom.
Yeah, his boss is quite young as well. And he says, just go off and do this. And the next thing it goes to the customer and it makes a mistake.
Our daughter has the opposite extreme where she's gone into a job where there's too much control and she can't send an email. And she's a professional who's been working for a while. Can't send an email without it being double-checked at
her boss's
levels.
boss.
Boss and the boss's boss. We're going, really? So, yeah, it can be either extreme.
Okay, now we come to the last part of the program now. Can you share the project that you guys that have done with the SEAC or some interesting success case?
Well, I think we've been partners with Gaia and Andrew for 15 years now as part of Tirian International. And I think going way back, when we talk about education or learning, what you have to do in innovation in education is you have to educate people in a different way than we used to as well. So training as an event is typically a waste of money.
Right.
And so over the years, what attracted us to this amazing couple and company is the fact that they do amazing experiential learning, so that they actually walk the talk about being able to create experiences around change, around creativity, around innovation, around product development. And so they've brought to us, and we've worked together to develop and launch courses around Who Killed Creativity, to programs, experiential programs on change or teamwork, called On Thin Ice, or Chocolate Factor. So they're very innovative in the tools and processes and programs that help people work together more effectively. They're more creative, more innovative, and so that's our ongoing lifelong pursuit. And we plan on doing much more of that within Southeast Asia, as well as through our new learning platform, Your Next You.
All right. If I'm very interested in this, and I'd like to learn the creativity and the innovation things with you guys. What should I do? I mean, attend which class?
Well, we've given so many avenues, from the book to this podcast to videos, but obviously in Thailand with SEAC, and this is the beauty of us working with them, is we love the research, we love developing the programs. We're missing a fourth person here, and that's Jim's wife and / partner, which is also interesting because there's two partners running companies. So there's a lot of interrelationship going on here, but we love the design and the research and creating these greater programs, but we don't want to run a big company. I think we started our companies about the same time, 20 odd years ago. So we all started with nothing. These guys have just been amazing at building, to me, one of the most phenomenal companies in the world. I mean, it really needs to get bigger than Thailand because it is so good at what it does. And I think you're so lucky having it in Thailand. I don't see anything else like it around the world. And as Jay said, we've been to a lot of countries. So we love designing the programs and then allowing them to be taken into different, with our partners around the world, but particularly SEAC, because they can then take the programs. They don't just take them and spit them back out again. We spend so much time with them, making them fit the Thai culture, making them fit the models that SEAC have designed, whether it's a one-day workshop, that you've got this new one, Your Next You, which is small mini micro sessions, an online app that SEAC are putting together. There's so many different platforms through to...
No, you can sign up for it's not just an app, it's a learning ecosystem and community.
Okay.
It gives you access to 2,000 or 3,000 different learning events a year.
So excited, if I'm just a Thai lady and I can learn and develop myself from global experts through SEAC.
There you go.
Yeah. And the last question, Jaya, I heard your book's called The Innovation Race. Haven't got time to read it yet, honestly, but I wonder who win the innovation race?
It's a very good question, because I think it will take a long time for that game to play out. And I think too often we focus on the short-term winners and who we think are the biggest and the best now, and it might be a Google or Apple or whoever looks like they're being the most innovative and creative. But we'll have to see over the long term who can sustain that by having the best leadership approach, the best culture to support both that exploration and preservation orientations simultaneously. So let's see who does that over the long term, and they will be the ultimate winners, I think.
Well, it's like the reality TV, isn't it? There's different seasons and different episodes, and sometimes those that are coming last end up coming first, and vice versa.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a very interesting conversation. Thank you, Dr. Gaia and Andrew Grant, for the podcast today.
Thanks so much. Lovely to be here.
Thank you, too.
Thanks.